I love making useful things out of herbs. This video is about making quick and easy herbal ointments. It is not the traditional method. I go over that method in my book, Herbs the Answer Lady Tells All. But this one is simpler and quicker and also works well. Today I'm going to show you an ultra-quick method of making homemade herbal salve. This is not the traditional one that involves olive oil and beeswax, which is the one in my book, but this is still very useful. This one involves petroleum jelly, and there are lots of opinions on whether that's acceptable or not. I'll let you do the research and make your own decision and not discuss that further here. In my opinion, for the use I have in mind, it's fine. What you see me doing is sorting fresh chickweed. The chickweed is what I want. The leaves and other garden debris are not wanted, so I'm pulling them out. And you decide whether it's rained recently enough and the rain is clean and that's good enough, or that you should wash these. If you do wash the herbs, dry them a little. They don't have to be bone dry, but you won't want extra moisture in because it will sizzle unpleasantly. Now, as always, when you make any kind of home medicinal, it's your responsibility to know whether your family tolerates it or is allergic, and that's true of all the ingredients. It's also your responsibility to collect it from a place that you know to be safe. These days, I know what's in my yard, and it's got high hedges around it, so drift of pesticides is minor. But I certainly would not collect herbs from the roadside as I might have years ago. Chickweed has a number of historical uses, and this is not about those. That's just what I'm making, and you can look it up and see if it would be useful to you. This technique works anytime you're using fresh herbal material. That leaf needs to go. It takes, as you see, an enormous amount of plant material to make not very much salve. It doesn't have to be as much as I'm using, but if you want it to be maximally strong, and in the case of chickweed, I do, why not get in as much as you can? Remember, there's a tremendous amount of moisture in here. The actual solids are not very great. Now we spoon in the petroleum jelly straight from the jar. Any brand will do. This is Rexall brand because it was available inexpensively and close to home. And I'm just going to put it in. I could have put it in before. I can put it in now because it won't be very long before it melts on in. So I'll spoon the whole jar for this purpose. Now, place the pan on low heat. Arm yourself with a wooden spoon or paddle. Mine is actually bamboo, that's good. And prepare not to budge from this position until this phase is done. Obviously, we're heating a grease that could overheat and endanger us. Oops. That's a little bit of ground ivy that I didn't mean to have in there. It's not going to endanger us because I'm going to stand right here and watch it like a hawk. Do not answer the phone. Make sure the kids and dogs are safely out of your way and can't get anywhere near, and stand here. You're hearing it begin to sizzle. That's normal and should happen. The Vaseline is melting down into the plant material, and the plant material is already sinking. Use your spatula or spoon to keep everything together in the center. Don't let anything flop over the edges. The product will start foaming like this, and that's okay. It's doing a couple of things. It is removing the moisture from the herbs and putting it out into the air, which eventually we want that all to happen. It can't stay in the salve or the ointment. And it is extracting what's useful in the plant and putting it into the Vaseline. However, it needs to stay like this, a low foaminess. If it starts to rise up in the pan, if it smells, it's going to smell a little funny because you're boiling oil and herbs, but if it begins to smell overheated, immediately turn the heat off. As a matter of fact, this first stage should only take between 5 and 10 minutes. Let the grease completely melt. Let it sizzle like this for a little bit. Stir it good, and then turn it off. And we'll repeat this process several times. Doing it that way preserves as much of the freshness of the herb as possible and improves safety. Here we go. I shouldn't let it get any higher than this. Off it goes. It's off now, but it's going to continue to sizzle for a little bit on residual heat. So stay with it until that is completely stopped, and then you can take a break. This has been sitting for 10 minutes, and it's still liquid, which means that the goodness from the herb is still seeping into the oil, well, the Vaseline. And I'm going to let that happen till it hardens and cools, and then start over. After a couple of cycles of heating and cooling, the oil will start to change color. We're right at the beginning of that color change now. Here we are starting episode number 4. You can see my spoon is stuck in the hardened grease, and that the plant material is getting darker as it loses its green to the oil. A safety reminder as we progress: never leave, always keep the heat very low, keep pets and children out of the room. We're really ready to do the last time heating up. You can see some of the salve here on the spatula, and it's green. Can you hear that? That's a somewhat crunchy, crispy sound, indicating that the plant material has dried out. All of the moisture has been expelled, and with it, most of the good stuff has gone into the salve. So let's finish up. By the way, at first it looked as though nothing was happening. It always does. It took about 10 cycles through the heating, stirring, and turning off to rest process to produce this. In between cycles, you may want to cover the ointment with something like this. This is a bug excluder that's really meant for picnicking. You don't actually want to put the pot's real lid on it, because that would prevent the moisture from continuing to exit. Let the salve cool a little bit, but to the point that it's still liquid. Strain it first through one colander into a good-sized vessel. I used a mixing bowl here. Now through a finer strainer into its permanent residence. I'm using the original container. This makes it much easier. There's always a certain amount of loss of product. And that's all that remains of that huge pile of plant material we began with. I used the original container that the petroleum jelly came in. Another option is to use glass, and if you do, you should use canning jars, which are made to take the heat. I've used them very successfully in the past. Depending on the temperature, it may take a couple hours to set, but it always does. It resumes the original texture of petroleum jelly, so it keeps very well. However, just as with any other product, you've got to keep your eye out for signs of contamination. If you see mold or anybody starts to itch when they use it, its days are done.